He published 13 books of poetry, co-edited Coastlines, The Poetry of Atlantic Canada, and 2 volumes of In the Writer's Words. We would like to warmly welcome Laurence to the stage to discuss his 3rd volume, In Writer's Words, which makes a valuable contribution to Canadian literature, showcasing his interviews with 8 significant poets of the contemporary period, including our own Keith Garebian. Laurence?
Okay. Okay. First of all, welcome to fellow writers, poetry lovers, great readers, to the launching of my book, In the Writer's Words, Conversations with 8 Canadian Poets. I'd like to extend a special thanks to Michael Mirola, Marissa Jorgensen, and the whole Guernica team. I'm going to read some excerpts from my introduction, but I must warn you that there will be no ad-libs. Much as I like to, because of the time limit, I will confine myself to the text. In the 1990s, I interviewed writers for the first volume of In the Writer's Words, Conversation with 8 Canadian Poets, Louis Dudek, P.K. Page, Al Purdy, and Simogowski, among others. You may have heard of them. The artistic vision of poetics and techniques influenced subsequent generations of Canadian poets. Al Purdy was known for his open form and polyphonic voice, among many other things. P.K. Page expressed a philosophical wisdom in her structured stanzas and was renowned for her experiments in the ghazal and the glosa. Louis Dudek's involvement with Irving Layton and Raymond Schuster brought vibrant ideas to the literary scene in Canada, while Simogowski, with her feminist approach and variety of forms, inspired and provided new expression for other poets. And the second volume of In the Writer's Words, Conversation with 10 Canadian Poets, followed. For this volume, I interviewed writers representing the last quarter of the 20th century and the first quarter of the 21st century. Al Moritz, who's here tonight, coming from the United States, brought an international idea of poetry influenced by Miwash, Jimenez, and Ashbery, with experiments in different styles and forms. George Eliot Clark presented Africadian reality in his groundbreaking Whyla Falls and expanded it into a universal vision in his cantos poems. Daniel Lockhart expressed his First Nation tradition and history in contemporary forms mixed with a biting satire. Sue Sinclair brought new theoretical ideas and a philosophical approach to Canadian poetry. Brian Bartlett evoked a strong maritime sensibility along with its unique nature and place in Canada. For the third volume, in the Writer's Words, Conversations with 8 Canadian Poets, I continued interviews that covered relevant aspects of the writers' lives, the evolution of their aesthetics, the nature of their individual voice, and their relation to their place. Here they are. No ad-libs. Di Brandt, who engaged with poetry on multiple fronts, including feminist, political, ecological, ethnic, and aesthetic perspectives. In addition to her original poetry, she published essays on Mennonite history and ecopoetics, maternal narratives. Herménégilde Chiasson, an Acadian writer, who you probably are not familiar with, but well worth discovering. along with Gerald LeBlanc and Herménégilde LeBlanc, brought a renaissance in Acadian poetry as they sought to move Acadian poetry from a religious and secularized art and away from that victim-tormentor equation. Chiasson's degrees are in visual arts, and so art has become an essential part of his oeuvre, which he often incorporates into his books. Another theme that important is love and sexuality, as in the works such as Vous, Profitez, et Conversation. Lornia Crozier is one of the most dynamic Canadian poets of her generation. She is a consummate craftsperson, keenly aware of the structure of the poem, the strategic arrangement of lines and breaks, of the subtle effects of rhythm and music in the poem. It's one of the most compelling parts of the poem. Sometimes I felt I was in a studio, a film studio, aware of all the fantastic effects that writers could produce in visual and all kinds of other poems. Sorry for the ad-lib. Crozier writes boldly and honestly about the complexity of human relationships, the powerful effects of nature, in particular the Saskatchewan prairies where she grew up, and the incredible possibilities of language. Mary Dalton is one of the most exciting Newfoundland poets who appeared in the 1990s along with Carmelita McGrath, Agnes Walsh, and Michael Crumley. They were part of a new wave of poetry daring to use the real language of Newfoundlanders. Dalton, in her first book, The Time of Icicles, satirizes American tourists, the federal government, and a CBC broadcaster. Good for her. She also, like Robert Hillis, draws a portrait of her parents and celebrates the nature of the place where she lives. Keith Garebian, also here tonight, received an excellent public school and first-year education in Bombay, India, before emigrating with his family to Canada just before he turned 18. A memoir and two of his poetry books describe the genocidal tragedy of Armenian history. This is a must-read. In a 50-year freelance career, he has produced more than 800 reviews, articles, and interviews that demonstrate his passionate commitment to culture at large rather than mere provincial or parochial art and politics. Can't help it. Few Canadian writers have mapped out their families with as much depth and purpose as Robert Hillis, who writes perceptively about his father's struggles with poverty, unemployment, alcoholism, and his mother's schizophrenia. In her later books, he explores his marriages, his role as father, and writes about the passing of their brother. Hillis states, all ideas have an emotional center, and he finds that center in his personal emotional experience. Hillis is a philosophical writer who later ventures out into the world, becoming more interested in the concepts of time and change. He challenges the notion of the self. As I have come to understand, any self is but a moment in time. One of the most exciting poets in Canadian literature is Tim Lilburn. After graduating from the University of Regina with a degree in English, he spent 2 years teaching in Nigeria with Cuso. His 9 years in the Jesuit order deeply affected his writing, allowing him to develop methods of meditation and contemplation that he would later apply to his poetry. Lilburn edited 2 books of poetics, poetry, and knowing, and thinking, and singing, and poetry, the practice of philosophy. His work, based on ancient religious figures, his study of traditional philosophers on Husserl and Heidegger, and his expression of nature gave his poetry an exciting depth. How are we doing for time? A minute and a half. Wow, I can ad-lib. I've really enjoyed this book. It's so powerful and kind of life-changing in so many ways. These writers, to really look at their work, it's kind of an amazing sense. Stop that. Okay, we're getting there. Steffler grew up in a rural area near Thornhill, Ontario, and later moved to Corner Brook, Newfoundland. Okay, in the poets, in the writer's words, 8 Canadian poets in conversation, Volume 3 made valuable contributions to Canadian literature in many ways. Their devotion to the history of the land and its nature, the exploration of ambiguities and complexities of human relations with many references to First Nation people, as well as a celebration of sexuality and freedom of expression is admirable. The list can go on. However, you will learn more by listening to their voices as the reader of this book of interviews. It was a real and great pleasure to interview these outstanding Canadian poets. You can find more in the book, the third in the series of In the Writer's Words. How am I doing? You're not going to cut me off yet? We live in fear. We live in fear of the hook. Now I can ad-lib. Enjoy yourselves. It's poetry. Poetry in the deepest form. What can I say? You'll find so many deep revelations about the poets' lives. I love the biography. What the poets lived through. Isn't that exciting? You know, it's true. The relationship between what they lived through and the works, how it came out of what they lived through. You know, when John Steffler took the long plane rides in Newfoundland, he changed, found his voice. So find your place, find your voice, find your book, find anything you can. Am I done yet?
Thank you, Laurence. We like when you